Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the Taylor community. I see lots of unfamiliar faces, so I welcome you and thanks for joining us today. Every week here at the Taylor community, we have what we call a resident Cracker Barrel, and it's an opportunity for us to sit around and talk about different things that folks find of interest and things they want to learn more about. And not too long ago, someone said that they wanted to learn more and have some open discussion about Alzheimer's. And I said, I know the perfect person for that. So today we are joined by Barbara and Bill Zeckhausen. Over the course of his life, Dr. Zeckhausen has been a writer, a therapist, husband, minister, father, leader, and healer.
No wonder I'm so tired.
Now, on his Alzheimer's journey, it's time to share his accumulated wisdom with the masses. And I'm so very pleased and thankful to have you here to do that today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can we go now?
Thank you all for coming. This is very intimidating. This is a disclaimer. This is not the definitive scientific state of Alzheimer's affairs. This is just our story. And it's only the story of the beginning stages of this disease, too. This presentation is scheduled for an hour, but sometimes the journey takes detours and might last a little longer. If you have the need to leave at any point, please feel free. I heard somebody say they had a doctor's appointment. You all may have doctor's appointments and need to leave before it's over. But we'd also hope there'd be time at the end for some questions and discussion. But in our new world, time is fluid. So my comments, actually, as a caregiver, can probably be applied to anyone who's caregiving for a medical condition. I'll be talking about things that I've discovered so far as an Alzheimer's caregiver and things I've picked up from other caregivers along the way. And then Bill will share his story. The first piece of advice I was given as a caregiver was take care of yourself. On our first visit, our doctor warned that over 50% of his patients are gone or lose it before 50% of the caregivers go before the patients.
The Freudian slip.
A Freudian slip, okay. But just think what a mess you'd be in if you weren't here. The patient would be there if you weren't here. Haven't you often seen caregivers who look in worse shape than their patients, too? So when dementia or Alzheimer's is suspected, it's critical to get your wills, your legal medical powers of attorney, advance directives, all of that in order. That's kind of the first thing you should be thinking about. All kinds of legal documents have to be updated. So it's time to call the lawyer. We did that early on. Many of us have difficulty bringing up sensitive issues, but it's also important to discuss with the patient, while they still can participate, their wishes for their end-of-life care and their funerals. Atul Gawande's top-selling book, Being Mortal, is so instructive on this, but if you don't have time for the book, you can Google Frontline and Gawande, and there's a beautiful TV show. It's just under an hour, and it includes a lot of what's in the book. If it's tough to have this discussion about end-of-life issues, you might want to start the conversation with your own wishes. If something should happen to me, this is what I'd like, and then turn it to the patient. These conversations also should include parents, children, or siblings when appropriate, and even a professional if you feel there might be disagreements among family members about end-of-life decisions. These can be very touchy. So, how do we cope as caregivers or care partners? As you know, or many of you may know, this can be a long journey. The early to mid stages can last about 10 years or more, and the decline can be very gradual. So there still may be years for travel, adventure, laughter, joy. But there can be a lot of stress, so we need, as caregivers, to work on our patience. Everything seems to slow down. Things need to be repeated. Things that get lost need to be found. Questions get asked again and again, and this can get wearing, so patience is critical. Just this week, someone in our caregivers group said, as caregivers, we're tested every day, and some days we fail. It's the way it is. So we need to remember to be kind to ourselves and take time to breathe deeply and often. Along with patience, we need to develop a thick skin. When someone is frustrated and angry, the caregiver may become the target. The best I've heard is, don't take it personally. It's not your loved one talking, it's the disease. And that's very subtle but very true. And showing your frustration can be very distressing for the patient. Bill and I joke, we joke that I need a happy mask to hold up so that he can't see when I have a frustrated expression on my face. His 40 years as a therapist are still apparent as he watches for expressions or looks from others, but particularly me. There are books on Alzheimer's coming out practically every day. I found I would rather read a book by a patient that explains the disease from his or her experience than, and we've shied away from the books on care in the last stages. At this point, it's why go there now? We have time to learn from professionals or other caregivers who are in a similar position as the time comes. So I would hope every caregiver has friends you can share with. The fear of losing friends as you go through a long process can be real. Some folks really just can't cope. And they don't know what to say, but new friends will appear. Many of them will have gone through a similar situation with a family member, and many of them just understand. If someone offers to shop or prepare a meal or take a loved one for a ride or spend a few hours with them, accept. People want to help, and you will need and appreciate it. It's also critical that your loved one keeps involved with friends too. The socialization is so important when withdrawal and loneliness are easy to fall into. But caregivers need to keep a part of our life that's our own. Gardening, music, crafts, sports. These are the things that can keep us centered. And I was going to say sane, but Bill said, don't say sane. Well, we'll have these circles of friends when we're no longer in the caregiving role. We all know how physically challenging and emotionally draining caregiving can be. So we need to conserve our physical and emotional energy as we can. We need to get rid of the things that are a drag on our energy. That may be committees, that may be even negative friends, whatever. We need to focus on what brings us joy and protect ourselves. I'm not normally a groupie person, but I'm now part of a caregiver support group. It's so helpful to learn you're not alone, to share the acquired wisdom with others who've been through this journey, and to laugh and cry together. We've started 2 groups in Laconia, and they meet concurrently. One is for the caregivers, and one's for the partner with dementia. They're informal, they're free, they're at the Congregational Church every week, and folks come in with all levels of issues with their parents, spouses, siblings, and everyone says they pick up a little something each time. We learn strategies to deal with difficult behaviors and declining abilities. One person was dealing with a wanderer. They found him on the front porch ready to leave, and rather than scold him, they asked if he'd had a nice walk, and wouldn't he like to come in for some hot chocolate? So he looked a bit confused, but that sounded like a good idea. So he came in, and an incident was averted. So one concept we've learned is to redirect rather than to scold or to argue. Fortunately, this hasn't been necessary for us yet. Our move to the Taylor inspired other people in our group to consider moving. One couple moved to Havenwood in Concord, and others are starting to talk about it. So just getting the ball rolling and seeing the people who are a little bit ahead of you on the journey is helpful. Our group shares the knowledge of the services available in our area. We compare experiences with different memory care facilities. It turns out that Laconia Service Link has small grants for emergencies, and one member got a grant in one day to hire an aide for his wife because he had to have emergency back surgery, and she didn't want anybody in the house, but that was something that he was able to get access to right away, so they're very helpful. This guy is a classic instance of a caregiver promising too much and being the first in the couple to go. For this man, our caregivers meeting is the only hour in the week that he has a break from his rather demanding spouse. In our group, we talk about when and how to deal with the need for the patient to give up driving. There are all sorts of strategies to deal with this one. One is having a doctor report your situation to the Motor Vehicle Bureau and having them pull your license. But some people in the group have come up with other strategies. You cut the wires in the guy's truck. You give him a fake key. And some just forget about it. But some people get lost or have near accidents and they realize themselves that it's time. It's giving up a lot, but the safety and the legal liability is often what helps people make that decision. In our group, one man decided to quit driving when he took in that if you're in an accident and they discover you have Alzheimer's, you could be wiped out financially. So that's pretty important. We have several professionals who volunteer an hour each week to help facilitate the groups, and that's been very helpful. Bill can speak to what happens on his side of the wall, but from what I've heard, the patients who were initially reluctant to come and were sort of dragged by a spouse now look forward to the camaraderie and the feeling that they can just be who they are and nobody's there to criticize them, be understood. One of my hardest lessons has been learning how to handle conversations in groups. If Bill is telling a story, I can't interrupt to correct the facts, although I've been known to.
Remember, I'm going to talk after you.
It totally throws off his train of thought when I interrupt, and I've tried to learn to intervene only when asked. We're working hard so this won't happen today. Small groups. Small groups are much easier to manage for Bill, and large groups can be rather overwhelming. Not this group, of course, but in a social situation. So 6 people at dinner is probably optimal. And even family dinners or family gatherings are best when they're small. I'm learning to let little things, story details slide. Some things aren't worth fighting for. At each step on this journey, we need to be ready with a plan. When we can't manage things by ourselves, getting in-home care is important. A good suggestion is to interview folks in the different agencies that provide home care. Some work hard to match the caregiver to the patient. You may start with a person who just comes in for a few hours a week. I know most people hate the idea of having a babysitter. They don't want to go there. So it can be tricky. When you use a reliable agency, they'll have done background checks, and hopefully they'll have backup caregivers. If you hire independent folks, you could get high and dry if they get the flu, for instance. But again, caregivers all over the place are short supply and underpaid. What's really needed for caregivers are day treatment facilities. We need to have a day or an hour to shop. One woman said, "I just want to go buy a bra without my husband coming along." So it's important to have time for yourself, a cup of tea with a friend, a yoga class, a time to relax. And this will give us the strength to care for our loved one longer at home, which is a huge financial savings in the long run. But finding day treatment is almost impossible. It's rare and it's costly. There's one nonprofit in Bristol that takes 8 people 1 day a week. That's it for the Lakes region. I spoke to somebody here about it, and the comment was they'd been looking into it, but it's a real money loser. There are a lot of regulatory hoops to jump through if you want to establish something official, I guess. But I would think there'd be a lot of folks around here who would be interested in volunteering for a morning or a day, or just being a partner for somebody. The place in Bristol has somebody paired up with you. It's a volunteer who goes with you. And they had one gentleman who'd been a pilot in the Second World War. And they found a caregiver or a volunteer who came in with the same experience. So they had a fabulous time together. So these kinds of magical things can happen, but not enough. And when you think of the number of people around here and the numbers of people with dementias, I think there may be a large unmet need. Sometime, if I get some energy, I may start looking at this for here. However, not right now. Caregivers themselves need an emergency plan. This is something that hadn't occurred to me, but say we have a medical emergency, we need a trusted friend who has a key and come in and stay with our loved one until relatives or proper help can get here. I know the people here will come and stay with the person who's not the patient if this is necessary. But I put that out as important for people in the community, know what to do if something should happen to you as the caregiver. As we check out memory care facilities for that last stage, we need to find out about the costs. We have to be realistic about what we can afford. Are we ready for $80,000 a year annually? Taylor has a list to get on, but if you're not connected here, you might want to look at some of the other options in town and get your name on a list, because it can take months to get in, and sometimes that's important right away. If you have long-term care insurance, make sure it will apply in the facility you choose. I have a friend who found out the hard way and had to fight the insurance company long after her husband had died just because of some little thing. So check that out too. Another warning is don't promise the family or kids that you'll take care of the patient at home forever. We've had people say that. There may come a time when this is just physically or emotionally impossible. We've also seen how siblings and kids can flee and duck responsibilities. So if you're not getting the support you need from relatives, you might want to bring them into your home and see what you're dealing with. So they'll get a little empathy for what's happening. One group member put her 90-year-old mother in a nursing home after caring for her for 8 years. And she observed, they have 6 to 8 people doing what I was doing all alone. You bear that in mind. So there's no time when we need to feel guilty about needing more help. A friend of mine suggested embracing technology. She said it can be a big help in managing chronic care. You keep records of medical powers of attorney, doctors, finance, medications, phone numbers, insurance information on your tablet or your iPad. And she also added it's a great source of entertainment for the hours you sit waiting at doctor's offices. So, Bill wants very much to help me. He's expressed how badly he feels causing me the stress of being a caregiver. We moved here in October, so that's been an added level of confusion for both of us. Things appear in all sorts of odd places. We haven't labeled drawers yet, but that's definitely a good idea. If you can keep in mind that short-term memory loss is really lost, it's easier not to scold or get mad when things get misplaced or forgotten. Nagging also really messes up a relationship, and it just doesn't do any good. It's also hard not to step in and take over. But respecting a patient enough to let them do things for themselves and maintain some independence as long as they can is important. Things may not get to be up to our standards, but did I say patience before? Meanwhile, we live each day. It won't get better than today, and we try to find something interesting to do each day. We have a calendar so we know what's coming up, and boy, I need that as much as Bill does. We see a show, we'll visit a friend, we'll look at family photo albums, we'll reread important letters, call old friends to reminisce, take a walk, sing, play the trumpet, get an ice cream, review life and its high points. It's a wonderful trip down memory lane. And that's where all the best memories are at this point. For Bill, meaning is the most important thing for him to find out of this nasty disease. If he can set an example for someone by being able to talk openly about the disease and put them at ease with talking about it, that provides a meaning. If he can give a doctor, many of whom have little training in how to deal with Alzheimer's patients, a way to relate to them or let them know the importance of giving information to the patient, that will make his day. So each day is different. Some days, if Bill's low or tired, he'll go to the gym. He'll come up to the gym. I'm so thankful it's so close. He doesn't have to drive to Planet Fitness anymore. So he loves to engage people in conversations with new friends, making new friends every day. And there's no dog he won't stop to pat on his walks. So getting out and interacting is critical for him. He still loves TED Talks and animal videos. And as long as I have the patience to work with him on the computer, he likes to it's a great source of amusement and entertainment. Bill likes to get out and run, and all the buildings in our community kind of look the same. So the tendency to get lost is right there. I have to thank people who's picked him up every now and again. So our next purchase is going to be a GPS device. A friend recommended one, and we've ordered it. It's an app. I have an app on my telephone, so I should be able to know where he is when he's out on his walks. So Alzheimer's affects everyone differently. And they say if you come into it with good cognitive skills, that part of your brain keeps you alert and active longer. Bill's years as a psychotherapist are not lost. He sees and is sensitive to interpersonal dynamics. As for short-term memory, gone is gone. So that though you've introduced yourself and though you've had a nice conversation, he may not remember your name or what is said. As a matter of fact, although Alzheimer's isn't contagious, that's happening to me too. What day is it is a great question for any retired person. But forgetting things you have to do in an hour or 5 minutes is not uncommon now. I'm often accused of not telling him things that I've mentioned numerous times, but he understands that that might be the case. In addition to the joyful and humorous times we have, and there really are some funny ones, we are aware that we're also grieving. We're grieving the losses of the memories we've built together. We're grieving about what's about to come. And these feelings are important to acknowledge. And perhaps ministers or social workers or therapists can be helpful easing people through these times. We haven't been involved in any clinical trials. With Bill being 83, we kind of believe the new drugs will probably not help us or our kids. We're experiencing the slow decline, but we're still managing well. With support and with all the friendly, understanding folks around here, I trust we'll carry on well. Bill's courage, determination, and insights are really inspirational to me and to some of you. The disease provides its frustrations, but I'm trusting the love we've shared for more than 61 years will keep us going and get us through. So I thank you all for being here for us.
what is commonly said is if you've seen one Alzheimer's patient, you've seen one Alzheimer's patient. So this is my story. People ask, how are you doing? It depends on when you ask me. And I say the same thing to people who are very kind, and we've known each other. I may not remember their name, and it's taken me a time to say, I know who you are, but I don't recognize your name. I mean, it's just embarrassing, and I understand why that's true, but the part of me that's still there, it's just awkward. But people understand that, and I'm getting used to it. And people ask, again, how I'm doing. It depends on when you ask me. Some days I feel positive progress, and some days I sense profound regression. Barbara has had to remind me about the beginnings of my journey with this disease. I don't believe what she says on this, but I'm humble enough to know she's probably right. She says about 5 years ago I would forget trumpet lessons or sessions with therapy patients I had. I was in my late 70s and starting to close my practice. And I didn't have Alzheimer's in mind. I think I'd heard about it. But my introduction to it was very, very traumatic. There was about a year when I was afraid I might have some sort of dementia. I knew that was a bad thing. And I was introduced to how bad it is by two shocking incidents that stuck in my memory, which just raised my anxiety, and your anxiety makes you forget or not being able to finish sentences. One was the clergy, and Dick is back there somewhere. There you are. We used to go once a month at LRGH to watch a movie or a talk. And when I was suspicious that maybe I was getting some Alzheimer's, I hadn't said anything to anybody. And there's a film that was unique, and I would like to know who was stupid enough to put that film up. A movie was put on a screen with no introduction. Nobody got up and introduced it. And it was a group of maybe a dozen or more men who were all sitting in a chair with their heads on a table, like this. And I remember it like yesterday, which was a freaky way to learn about Alzheimer's. I wondered what they were doing, what the point was of this movie. And after maybe 5 minutes, I think probably a professional singer, but a good singer, walked in the room, and Dick, were you there?
Yes.
Okay. Walked in the room and sang about 3 lines. And one of the 50 or so men, one of them lifted his head up. And then this person who sang left, disappeared. We don't know to this day who that was and why he was there. And one of the clergy said, and I can afford to get stuck because Barbara knows she can make up something even. She often makes up something. And then I get angry at her, and then that screws it up. One was seeing a film. It showed men sitting around it. I already said that. I got to catch up to where I went. To me, it made no sense seeing. I don't know how we figured out, or I don't think we were told. This is the late stage of Alzheimer's. So I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, one head popped up, and then it went down. And I'm thinking, this is the late stage of Alzheimer's. What's the point? And that was very scary. And I translated it. If I had Alzheimer's, that would be me. And the meaning of life, in my mind, was what's the meaning of being alive? What's the point? And that was depressing. The second introduction I got to Alzheimer's, I facilitated physician support groups, maybe 8 of them, weekly for 40 years. Each time we had the meeting, each physician would start off and say what issue he or she was dealing with. One of the physicians uniquely reported that I have a new patient who has Alzheimer's, and I have no clue what to say to him. And no other doctor in the circle said a word. So that was scary. That was absolutely out of the blue after years. So it was something it couldn't be talked about by the doctors, and that was scary. And so I started off naturally thinking maybe I have that. I've always been a hypochondriac, so I got it. Unfortunately, I was right. And anyway. So this was my picture of the disease. End stage, horrible, and quick decline, scary. And one of the things when you get Alzheimer's, probably everyone is ashamed of it. And so you hide it. And and I can say some things that could be helpful. Some of you are going to get Alzheimer's. I imagine some of you have it, and the rest of you are scared itless that you will get it, even if you don't get it, because we all know it's an epidemic around the world, and there's no cure for it at this point. And what's the name of the clinical trials for cancer had been the main clinical trials. But with Alzheimer's, there's more federal money put to Alzheimer's clinical trials than anything. It used to be cancer was the number one. Now it's dementia, and they're saying that it's being said that the hope is that there'll be a cure in 10 years, but it may be 20 years. And if there's a cure in 10 years, if you already have it, it's not going to help you. So, okay, I wanted to talk to somebody. Again, I was freaking out, and I think anyone would freak out if they thought they were getting Alzheimer's, and would try to hide it, which is the worst thing you could do. And if you only remember one thing from what I'm saying, if you feel you have it, or if you learn you have it, do not hide it, because that makes it worse. And then you're just stuck in your own negative thoughts. And from seeing what I saw in the two illustrations I've given, I was thinking, if I really got it, my life's over, and I don't want to hang around, because suffering and scared and depressed, and I can't do anything. And so, not knowing what to do, I mean, I may just put out 3 things today that will help you not go through the hell I went through for at least a year, because I was hiding it. And there were some other things I was doing to protect myself, and they were the worst things I could have done to make it worse. Oh, right. I said to myself, when I get to that place, I will commit suicide. I thought, I have no meaning, no contribution to make, and I was terrified every morning. We went to have, you can come in if you want, about what was the next step on seeing a doctor for Alzheimer's.
You went up to Dartmouth finally at the advice of a friend, and we went to get those preliminary tests, and those are the tests that everybody's heard about. Remember the story, name the vegetables, count backwards from 100 by 7, and draw the clock. You know, those are the typical things. Very helpful.
I was good at counting 7s backwards. I didn't know why I was doing that, but whatever.
So that was the mild cognitive decline.
Oh yeah, this woman at Dartmouth gave a diagnosis, which was mild cognitive decline. I didn't know what the hell that was, but I figured out that was the beginning of Alzheimer's. That was really brilliant.
What was her recommendation?
Oh, the recommendation was what's the pill?
Tested for vitamin B12.
Yeah, I should get tested for vitamin B12. That was the one recommendation. So anyway, when I had my worst fear validated that, yeah, I'm having the start of dementia, which may have started 10 years before, and it didn't know it. I really was so miserable that I decided I can escape this. I don't want to continue living this way because it was a nightmare every freaking day. And so what?
Who told the kids?
Oh, yeah, I told they weren't adults, but they were teenagers. And
They're in their 50s, but that's okay.
thank you. She's validating my dementia. Did you hear that? No. The kids were in their 50s. So I would hope they were that old, because I wouldn't want to tell 10-year-olds your father's going to kill himself. And I explained to them, my daughter, our daughter, is a PhD psychologist, and our son is brilliant. I don't know what he does. He does high price racing brakes for, not racing brakes for racing cars. And so I told them, because I really, to decide to get relief by killing yourself makes it worse, because then you're scared when you wake up. Because I didn't want to kill myself, but I didn't know what else to do. Oh yeah, it was very, very moving. When I said to Dina, our daughter, who at that point was a PhD, I told her what I had going, and I wasn't gonna let myself live through that. And I definitely knew to tell my son and daughter if I was going to do that, it would be less horrible if you didn't talk about it, and it's a shock, and then they don't, that's a terrible way to kill yourself. If anybody wants to have some ideas about how to kill yourself, come call me up. So they both saved me in a way. I thought my son would argue with me, and he's smarter than I am. And he didn't. He said, "Dad, I'll support whatever you decide." That was moving. And my daughter, who was a terror at the clinic as a kid, because if she saw a needle coming, she had a piercing scream, and all the staff at the clinic were terrified. They said, "Here's this little girl coming in," and I thought, I said to her, I didn't want her to be there. I really didn't. And she said, "Dad, I want to be there when it happens." And what that did for me was it communicated what deep love. I knew my daughter, that was very heroic for her to say that, but she meant it. And so I wasn't going to do that to her. And so it's not funny, but you came here to find out about what can happen inside. It was suggested anyway that we consult a neurologist. The one we met with said I might have a brain tumor, as one of his patients had. When the tumor was removed, he said, her cognitive abilities return. So I got an MRI praying that I had a tumor in my brain. Unfortunately, I didn't. And but still nothing was suggested that one can do on this long journey. Finally, somebody told me about the Alzheimer's Association. I'll keep reading, so don't you have to go sweat it out. So, that was projection. Someone finally told me about the Alzheimer's Association, a valuable resource available 24/7 by phone. If you only get two things out of this time, there are two books that you will, if you haven't read them, and one of them I'm sure you haven't read, you will thank me for the rest of your life. One is, some of you know Frankl, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. That was sexist, but that was like 30 years ago. But that, when I read again in that, it pulled me out of my depression. Man's Search for Meaning, paperback, might be $6. And that pulled me out of my depression. And then there was something, and then the article by...
Alzheimer's from the inside out.
Yeah, Alzheimer's from the inside out. If you probably came here wanting to learn something about what it's like to have Alzheimer's. You're seeing some manifestations, but not really at a deep level what goes on. The book that you want to get is a large book. It's hard to put down. It's called Alzheimer's from the Inside Out. Will this almost former hippie become aggressive? This is what Taylor was asking his doctor.
I'm the doctor.
You're right.
I can say with a great deal of confidence that the answer to your question is yes or no. We have to wait and see what happens.
So I'm Taylor again. Thanks a lot. Will I be aware of my aggressiveness when it is occurring?
That's a hard one to answer. You may or may not be aware of it. You may be aware of it and not be able to do anything about it.
Oh, I see. If I do become aggressive, what forms will it take and what are the warning signs?
The doctor turns his head toward the caregiver who is with me, lowering his voice. He says, "Will he understand what I'm saying? Does he bother you with questions like this? How long has he fixated on this issue? Now I know what you mean when you say he can sometimes be difficult."
Doc, oh, so it is.
Excuse me.
Oh, I skipped. Me, the doctor. No, the patient. Excuse me, doctor, I thought this was my appointment.
Oh, so it is. Those are two very good questions, and I'm glad you asked them. I'm not sure how to answer them.
Me, well?
Do you have any more questions I can answer for you?
Yes. Have any of your patients ever become aggressive with you?
That was a real problem for me, but I added straps to the stirrups, and they really cut down on the aggressive behavior.
No, I mean, have any of your patients with dementia ever become so frustrated with you that they became aggressive?
Usually not during my examinations, but sometimes during the Q&A. With them, they sometimes get worked up. I haven't figured that one out yet.
Me, oh. Well, why haven't you answered any of my previous questions? What's the sense of asking more questions?
Now hold on here. Don't get aggressive with me. I've answered your questions the best I can. I encourage my patients to ask me any and as many questions as they want.
Me, oh. Well, what have researchers discovered about patients like me and aggression?
Has anyone ever told you you ask extremely good questions?
Me, yes, you did about 2 minutes ago.
The dialogue goes on for several pages, then the doctor suggests Taylor see a psychologist for several days more testing to be put into a computer giving us answers to his questions. At the end, Taylor asks when he should come back to see him. Honestly, there's not much more I can do for you. Why don't you come back after you've pulled down your pants and peed in the middle of your living room? Then we can talk about other medications. Don't forget to stop by the front desk. It's how I stay in business, you know. I will have to code this as an established patient visit of extreme complexity and unusually long length. Call me anytime you have more questions.
Okay, she wants me just to read this last thing. The first stages of Alzheimer's may last for years, so our goal is to address one's internal concentration can and to create a meaning with this diagnosis. Part of which, for me, is sharing this information with people. We're all going to die, that's obvious, but the question for us all is how we're going to live. We'd now be happy to take any questions or comments you'd like to share.